What is up, folks? This is Addy Ads. Happy New Year's 2022. We're in the second week now of 2022. Got a great guest today, Franco from Franc Analysis, and he's had me on his show a few times. So I have finally got the chance to return the favor here now that the trial has ended, and I'm finally out of New York. I was in New York covering the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, and for those not familiar, I'm from the Midwest. I have done ghostwriting, and then released my own book, journalist, video reporter, investigative reporter, and I'm here with Franco, Franc Analysis. He's a geopolitical analyst, independent media analyst, and interviewer. And we're gonna get into Franco's background, his past careers, current careers, and how that's developed into the work he's doing today. But thanks for joining me, Franco. I'm glad to have you on the show, sir.
Addy, thanks for having me on, man. It's great to be on. Happy New Year to everybody. It's crazy that we're now in the second week of 2022. It's gonna fly by, just like 2021 flew by. But it's great to be on, man. Thank you.
Of course, of course. So I like to start from the beginning. If you're comfortable, Franco, where are you from, and are you still living there? Where have you lived? Where have you
I'm in
traveled?
the DC area.
Okay,
Yeah, so
DC area. And you're originally
there,
from the DMV, as they call it?
yeah, the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, and they're about to implement some COVID restrictions here in this county, like how they are trying to do in DC also. It's really unfortunate. Like I'm seeing people on social media and Instagram, even people who are apolitical that are like, "I've been vaccinated and I don't agree with this." And I mean, I don't tell anybody what my status is for because of the just personal reasons, but I'm definitely against this. I cover on the show the dangers of the vaccine, um, how this could lead to autoimmune diseases, the negative adverse effects that we're seeing, all these athletes that are collapsing post rollout, which doesn't mean that, oh, it's for sure the vaccine, but what other factor could it be that causes this massive increase in collapses that we're seeing in athletes? So I've been covering that a lot. This is going to affect the entire globe. I don't think we should be trusting these big pharma companies.
Yeah. And before you were doing this work, well, how did you start doing it? If I can, let's start there.
The COVID stuff, or in general, like the all the political stuff I do.
Yeah, I guess both. Your general video broadcasting. I know you do debates as well as interviews, and even your own independent stream sometimes as well.
Yeah, debates are actually a rare thing for me. I'm not like a I'm not like a debater, but I do want to challenge myself. I do want to step into the ring and test myself. Uh, and looks like if you just are calm, present information, don't let the other person irritate you, you can that's pretty much all you really need to perform well in a debate. There's probably more stuff to it, but I mean, I think I did pretty well for someone who's not a seasoned debater. Against my most recent debate against someone who we can talk about later. The only other debate that I can remember that I had on Frank Analysis was someone who I debated on the, the significance of the squad, like AOC and all those people, in actually helping us. I did pretty well in that also. And I guess the panel discussions where I have people with a whole bunch of different viewpoints that I do on my channel, I put up my 2 cents in. Sometimes it could turn into a debate with people. So I think those conversations that I've had with people with different viewpoints have helped. I started first on my friend's channel. They would cover sports and pop culture, and they had a local podcast. They were also on YouTube, and I wanted to help them out by I was like, hey, why don't we cover politics too? I can be your politics guy. So I did that. I was going to on the ground events covering anti-war protest and all these other events that were happening right before the pandemic, early 2020, right before the lockdowns. So then after that, I started doing more studio work since I had no other choice during that time. And then a lot of the political stuff started overwhelming the pop culture and sports stuff. So then I started my own channel, which is Frank Analysis, in which I collaborated more with other content creators, did solo videos, panel discussions, and when the BLM protests started up, I was on the ground for those. I was on the ground for a bunch of other stuff, Julian Assange protests, um, and I just love doing that. And I love talking to other on the ground journalists like yourself. Uh, so yeah, it's pretty much the origin story for Frank Analysis.
Okay, so it was pretty recent, just like maybe shortly before the Corona panic, let's say, of 2020.
Yeah, yeah, early 2020.
Okay, and where did you cover those protests you mentioned? Where, what cities were those in?
The anti-war protests were outside of the White House. Yeah,
Okay,
since I'm in DC, I can go to a lot of these protests in DC.
and there's an upcoming protest in DC, is there not?
Yeah, the 23rd there's an anti-mandate protest. So
Okay.
I'm looking forward to going over there and covering that. And I don't always agree with all the um, what's it called? All the stances of these protests that I cover. The mandate stuff I do agree with, but some of the other stuff, I don't. I'm not gonna agree with 100%, but I can stand in solidarity with people, or I can just be there just to cover what's going on. You know, what is upsetting people? Because at the end of the day, our country isn't working for us right now, and we want to hear why people are upset, right?
Definitely. There's a difference between, just covering what's going on neutrally and being an activist or active rally participant or protest participant. And, sometimes those lines can blur, but I think people should definitely distinguish between those two before they attend those sorts of things. But could you share with us what are some of those issues that you didn't agree with, but you nonetheless covered as a reporter?
Yeah, I was at the Justice for January 6th, which not 100% in agreement with everything until I started talking to people more and I realized, oh, they're here because they want some of these people that went to jail unjustifiably freed and how they were forced to be vaccinated while they were in jail. Um, so it wasn't initially what I thought it was going to be. So that these individuals, I believe, should be freed. It wasn't what I had. I was. It wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't what people were who were telling me about this event. That's not what it ended up being. Um, so I
What were
guess that
they
would be
telling
an
you?
example. They were telling me that they just want these individuals freed. These individuals that, oh, you're talking about the people who were telling me what it would be about.
Yes, yeah.
They were saying, oh, it's going to be another January 6th insurrection. They want Trump back into office. I myself don't like any politician at all. So I was thinking if this is going to be a Trump rally, I'm not going to be in 100% agreement with. Just like if it was like a Joe Biden rally, I wouldn't be in 100% agreement with that either. Um, so yeah, if it was mainly on freeing these individuals, then I mean I can stand in solidarity with those people. Um, yeah,
And you actually tend to lean left, right? Or at least historically, a bit.
historically now I don't know what you can identify myself as. I guess I'm just like just I'm just for truth. Uh, I'm my growth will be based on the amount of evidence that's presented to me. You know,
Hmm.
I'm wherever the truth is, that's where I align myself.
Okay. And I find it. Let me know what you think about this. Does it seem like because we're both pretty young, I think both still in our 20s. It seems like we're
Yeah.
kind of outliers in this work a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that because of how we've been indoctrinated to be tribal minded. Um, because you're also you don't consider yourself really leftist or on the right. or
Not
you're just
really.
like,
No, it's no.
yeah. Historically, I did consider myself on the left. I was watching a lot of left independent media. I still watch a lot of left independent media. I stand in solidarity with a lot of them on issues, but there's going to be things that they're not going to see 100% on what's going on. Uh, we're not covering the fourth industrial revolution, how that's ramping up enough. Soon, some of these individuals will catch up. It's like we're all on a journey. Some people get lost, they get absorbed by the propaganda, and then they stay stuck. And we just continue to move along on the path as we receive more and more information. And yeah, it's unfortunate to see some journalists and other content creators who stay stuck in like 2016, or they stay stuck in 2017 and hoping for a politician to come save them, hoping that a Bernie Sanders or an Alexandria Ocasio Cortez or a Donald Trump is going to be their savior uh, in what's going on in the world right now. Uh, the only way that we're going to be saved, in my opinion, is if we start relying more on each other, getting closer to our community, local based solutions like growing your own food and such, um, and informing ourselves more and more. That'll get us closer to what the real solutions are, not participating in these privately owned elections in which we get politicians that are working on behalf of these corporations and the ruling class. And as time passes on, they implement more policies that may empower these corporations and the ruling class even further.
What was your consumption of news and media like growing up? Did you watch Brian Williams every night, or did your parents watch that? Or yeah, what do you remember about that?
I don't watch the news. Uh, I was really invested in my social life. I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on. It was uh, like I was more focused on like more trivial things like I don't know, anime, comic book movies. Um, but I was always like someone who had like the unpopular taste, but I thought was better quality. Like for example, music. Uh, there's a lot of people that liked mainstream hip hop, for example. I liked the more like underground as well as old school hip hop. I would have debates about that. Um, and then it was in 2016 when I heard Bernie Sanders' message of, oh, these corporations are buying off our politicians, and that's why we can't get anything done. That's what got me into the rabbit hole, and I got a lot deeper into it than I thought I was going to get into it. Way deeper.
Did you, so you wouldn't say that you grew up with an interest in geopolitics or even history? That kind of
No,
developed later?
it developed later,
Mm.
and if I were to go back, I probably would want to study history. A lot of these things repeat, or as some people say, like it rhymes. Um, I would like to study ancient history and all history. What I studied was biology, and that's what helped me understand a lot about what's going on right now with COVID and these vaccines. And everything I learned through politics helped me see the context in which this biology is presented. Right? There's a lot of corruption in the science field, and a lot of people who are indoctrinated in these academic institutions don't take into account that context of corruption.
Mhm. Who were the first geopolitical analysts or commentators you started listening to?
Embarrassingly to say, it was the Young Turks, and then uh, I moved on to Kyle Kalinske, then Jimmy Dore, and then I started finding smaller content creators like Nico House, Fiorella, Isabel Pasta from the Combo Couch, all of which are from the MCSC network, which I'm now a part of. Um, and then as I started making content, my audience members will tell me about other content creators, journalists. I started looking at Whitney Webb's work, Brian Christian of The Last American Vagabond's work, Derek Bros, Corey Morningstar, Vanessa Beeley. So looking at that information, that's what got me deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. When as before, if you were to compare my analysis from early when I started my channel, it was more so, yeah, let's have faith in like these third parties. And now the more information I find out is like the third parties are not going to save us. They're incompetent. Uh, they don't talk to election integrity activists. They don't even talk to election integrity lawyers or anything. And the ruling class just has they have so much control over our elections, over the narrative, over the surveillance, uh, and it made me realize more and more how everything, our foreign policy, these little cults that you investigate, involving these crazy pedophiles, um, all these things are connected. The COVID narrative, all this stuff, you see it's the same people that are involved. We see BlackRock and the Vanguard Group involved in all these with all these corporations that are owned by Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, all of which have control over the mainstream narrative, over these mainstream media companies. BlackRock and the Vanguard Group are all over the place there, right? And I'm sure you probably know a lot about this also.
Yeah, yeah, I know a bit, certainly about BlackRock, Vanguard less so, but it's a big ball of wax, and I see you kind of as like a general intel collator, where you like to interview people and get their take, and that's very similar to what I started out doing. It wasn't until really recently, I would say the last 6 months or so, that I really started to specialize a bit. But you mentioned the MCSE network. Could you explain that or define that for people?
Yeah, that's the Mikasa Sukasa network that Nico House founded. Um, the first people he recruited were the Convo Couch, who are became election integrity activists. Nico House was an election integrity activist also, and their politics also evolved. If you were to look back at their early work, they were also like full in on Bernie Sanders. Now they don't believe electoral politics is going to save us. They're now covering election integrity in other countries. I was a new recruit last year, same as, I don't know if you know Steve. Oh, you know Steve Poikonen, right? You've been on his show from Slow
Yes.
News Day.
Yep.
Wait, you were on the Convo Couch also. I forgot about that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I
Yeah,
was. Yeah.
yeah. Um, Facts on the Ground with Misty Winston and Jesse Zerwell. Uh, and even HMO podcast, like they got some sports and pop culture people on there also now. But we're seeing now also we have these networks, and these networks aren't isolated from each other. Like they do collaborate with other
Yeah.
networks,
Definitely. Yeah.
and this is how we something that we are doing to overcome these this censorship obstacle that these big tech, not just big tech, but all these oligarchs are doing to try to silence us.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think it's necessary that those kind of independent, quasi-independent media networks collaborate with each other. Otherwise, I think the echo chambers will become more solidified, and it may actually do more harm than good. But it's really derived from a necessity due to only certain voices being allowed to speak, right? And you mentioned the Young Turks. Coincidentally, that was the same exact commentators that I started watching. I was
Mm.
in my second. I was a sophomore in high school when I first started watching YouTube geopolitical commentary or content, and I would kind of cycle in and out because I was very consumed with sports. My time was so it wasn't every day, but that was actually likewise, I started watching the Young Turks, and then I had to stop. They just got too radical and too one dimensional, right? So I don't think there's any embarrassment in that because they did used to
Yeah, I
be, I
guess
think,
so.
a lot better than they used to be, or that they are, excuse me. And even then, I think they still sometimes do okay, but they're just so bipartisan now. It's like you only would want to listen to them if you're part of the choir and you want to hear a sermon, right? Um,
Hmm.
I wanted to ask your thoughts on the 2020 election, just in general, and then we can go from there.
There's
Did
so
you
much
vote?
insecure. Um, no, for the general election. Oh, for the general election, actually, I did vote, but it was for I can't even remember her name from the Peace and
Jorgensen?
Freedom. No, Peace and Freedom Party.
Okay. See, I'm not even familiar with that one.
Yeah. Damn, what was her name? Well, I didn't vote for any of the major, uh, any of the big candidates. Um, in the primaries, I voted for Tulsi Gabbard, but I'm not I'm not gonna participate in any primaries or elections going forward.
Wow.
Um,
That's a pretty quick development because I know a lot of people go. Is that Gloria Lariva?
Gloria La Riva,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
yes, that's who I
Okay.
voted for. I
Okay.
forgot I even voted. You just reminded me. Um, but yeah, I was covering that when I first started my channel, like covering Tulsi Gabbard. I was a big supporter of hers. I don't agree with her takes now, saying that we should invade Africa to anticipate terrorism. Like this is what she was saying to criticize the wars in the Middle East.
Tulsi
Right? These
Gabbard
are
said this.
yeah. She said that we are in Africa to fight terrorism,
I
which
did
you should know
see
better.
last year she said something. I mean, and this is something I just misconstrued. I don't know if she was being dishonest, but she's definitely pro-war. Tulsi Gabbard is not anti-war.
Upon further reflecting on her stances, she was
Hmm.
always for drone strikes.
Yes.
Um, so I guess I was just really caught up in just the tribalism of Tulsi versus Bernie that I wasn't focusing too much on her faults. Uh, but yeah, she was like you said, she was always pro war, but she did make herself out to be this anti-war candidate. Um, she's more anti-imperialist than the other candidates, but that's not saying much. The bar is set extremely low.
Why won't you vote going forward, Franco? What made you come to that decision?
I don't even know if my vote counts. Um, I went through this article yesterday by truthout.org, and there's also work done by Whitney Webb on the voting machines and who owns them. These are easily hackable. There's not to mention election rigging occurs. Um, so I don't blame people getting mad and going out there and protesting like they did in January 6th. Uh, it wouldn't be a problem if there was more transparency in our elections. And of course, the mainstream media overhyped that event, trying to fearmonger and make people think that these other working class people are the problem, and these are the people we should be afraid of. When really it's those people at the top who control our elections that we should be afraid of. There's plenty of evidence of our elections being rigged. It's overwhelming. Uh, the Convo Couch does a great job covering this. As I mentioned, Whitney Webb also has discussed the voting machines. And as far as January 6th, I remember The Last American Vagabond going deep into not just the elections, but also how what appears to be how staged that event was, um, which I don't know what you've seen, but you listen to people like Ryan Dawson, so you probably have a similar stance as me in terms of the events of January 6th and how overhyped that was.
Were you there, Franco?
No, I wish I was.
Okay.
I had to go somewhere else.
Okay. Yeah, I was there. Yeah, I have a pretty good understanding of it too. I want to keep it on you though. We can talk about that on your show maybe. Um,
Okay.
did you attend university or no? I just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I did. That's where I studied biology. Um, don't know what else much to say about that other than these are indoctrinating institutions. Like a lot of the staff members were initially skeptical of the COVID narrative, but then when they heard Fauci and others like Walensky, these personalities on the CDC tell us more about this, then they're like, oh, okay. So, and then they started trusting this narrative. And I was like, you guys are molecular biologists, microbiologists, virologists, and you guys are trusting these individuals more than the initial skepticism that you had. It's this idea that they have that, oh, they're in that position for a reason, that they worked hard to get there. And that's the problem with not integrating the knowledge or the objectivism of our politics, the objectivism of our corruption, and implementing that into your scientific analysis. You know how that can affect results, or how that can affect the way that you look at the results.
Okay. Okay. Wow. And that's a lot to unpack there. What about the well, before I get to that, where did you matriculate? Did you graduate and where did you go?
I graduated from Towson University.
Towson?
Yeah.
Okay. And you were a science major. Did you find that even in your science classes, you found it politicized or not quite so much? Was that more so in your electives,
Um,
if at all?
you would see it more in the general science courses. You would see it more for like the non majors that have to take biology, right? Biology for non majors when
Right.
they're talking about climate change, and then when discussing solutions, like if the professor asks them, "Oh yeah, what are your solutions?" They're like, "Solar energy, windmills." But then we see that, oh, these are things that are being propped up by these green billionaires, many of which were in the oil industry, and they just want to profit off of the scare that is climate change. And there these green energies or alternative energies are still using oil. They're still using fossil fuels, and in some instances, it's even more harmful. And then they go out these fake green activists that are part of these nonprofit organizations like 350.org and what's the other one? Sunrise, which are funded by the people that we're supposed to be fighting against in George Soros, in the Rockefellers, in the Ford Foundation. Uh, it makes it makes you realize, okay, this is what's affecting the narrative in these institutions also. Like people hear this stuff like in the mainstream or even in elementary school, like they can hear like, oh yeah, solar energy, windmill energy, um, and then they that just gets ingrained in their head, and they don't put into context, just like these professors, the how the politics affects this stuff, and how imperialism is involved in this also, how we have to go into other countries and overexploit these resources from these countries so that we can make these giant windmills that only last about 10 to 20 years and then pollute the earth. So I guess that's what I see when I was in college, like in the general science classes. There's not enough integration on what's actually going on because these students don't know what's going on.
I wanted to ask you your thoughts on Donald Trump.
Uh, Donald Trump was still serving the ruling class in the military industrial complex at the end of the day, though he was able to, um, I guess, be more of his own person than a Hillary Clinton or a Joe Biden would be. They would be able to get away with getting into these wars in a more cryptic way, uh, saying like, "Oh yeah, we got to do this for human rights. We got to do this for women's rights, and invade these countries for that." Um, with Donald Trump, I didn't like his stance on Israel. Um, he assassinated Soleimani. So at the end of the day, though he does have this strong personality, and though he did what appeared to be him trying to be more independent as opposed to more traditional politicians, he still was able to be controlled by the military industrial complex.
What are your thoughts on Hillary Clinton?
Hillary Clinton would be able to get away with this stuff more cryptically, but she's more hated by this country. I think that having her would have been worse than having Donald Trump. Uh, People on the left would have fell back asleep, um, and then people would think that the solution is to get a Republican in office, uh, and we wouldn't have had 2020, in which many people saw through Bernie how much of a sheep herder he was. People saw it in 2016, but people saw it even more in 2020. So Hillary Clinton also is involved in the investigations that you've done and that Whitney Webb has done and Ryan Dawson and what I can't remember the other journalists, but they're in Consortium News. How they're part of this cult that is involved in a lot of shady stuff with that involves children, and she's done a whole bunch of other horrible stuff in Haiti and all these other countries. It's just a I I I can't stand Hillary Clinton. I think she's a horrible human being. Same thing with her husband. Same thing with Joe Biden, who was also part of the Democratic Leadership Committee that she was a part of. So I don't like that we had Donald Trump as president, but I'm glad Hillary Clinton lost. Uh, we're doomed with any president, but with her it would just be more annoying.
Yeah, more annoying for Middle Easterners and Africans, I think, too.
Yeah,
Uh, since you brought them up, what are your thoughts on the state of Israel?
Israel shouldn't be a country. Give the Palestinians their land back. Um, they're the only country in that region that has nukes, and they're acting as if all these other countries are a threat to them. And it seems like they're involved in a lot of their involvement goes a lot deeper than we think. Mossad, Robert Maxwell, who and then his daughter Ghislaine Maxwell, right? There's stuff that we should look at in terms of what Israel has their hands in.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask you, Franco, because we are kind of similar uh, in a way. How would you describe your and it's something I don't really like to talk about, but I think it's necessary just for learning. How would you describe your racial identity?
I'm Hispanic, Latino, Peruvian. Um, I feel like my heart is with the indigenous people of Peru. Um, I don't know. There's something there that I feel like there's like some. I feel some deep connection. When I go to Peru, and when I see indigenous people there. Um,
Wow.
I don't know if you experience that, like if you when you go to where you're from and or where one side is from in Mexico, or when you go to Norway.
Yeah, I've never been to Norway. I would like to go. I found out in 2020 that one of my ancestors, I guess he was an uncle of some sort, he was actually the ambassador to like two or three Scandinavian countries, including Norway. So I definitely want to visit Norway. I've only been to Mexico once. I was 6 or 7. I think I was 6, and I think I got food poisoning from some Mexican pan or sweetbread that morning. But I actually have a Peruvian connection as well. I was in New York, and at this market that was nearby to where my first host was letting me stay, there were some. I think they were from El Salvador, and so we would speak in Spanish sometimes in the morning when I was ordering breakfast. And he said that my accent sounded Peruvian to him, and that was the first time I ever got that. And I probably got that from my mother because my mother, even though she's Nordic American, Norwegian American, she has a Peruvian accent as well because that's where she learned Spanish. So I actually have my own Peru accent. I've never been there though, and I do want to return to Mexico and visit Norway one day and try to explore that. You know,
Peru's Peru's the people of Peru, their accent is really hard to imitate for other Spanish speakers. They like even the people that are really good at imitating like the Argentine and Chilean and Mexican accents and Spanish accents, when they ask them to do the Peruvian one, they're like, "Oh no, that's hard." So I mean, I'm able to do it because I grew up with it. Like my parents would speak with that accent, but damn, yeah. So you have that Peruvian accent because of your mom, because she lived there. Damn, that's pretty cool.
yeah, I've gotten the other one I got was Mexican, which was surprising to me because I've never really spoken with too many other than the people on my side, which we mostly speak English here in the States. So you speak Spanish then with a Peruvian accent, it sounds like.
Yeah, although it's like a Peruvian gringo accent, since I speak a lot of Spanish. I mean, a lot of English, obviously.
Sure, sure. And I wanted to ask as well, who do you think? It's kind of a hard question to answer, maybe because it's not really an objective craft. But if you had to pick, who's the best journalist or reporter on the planet?
That's a big question. I
Yeah,
have
it's
a lot of
hard.
people on my top list, and there's
Yeah,
probably
let's
people
do
that I don't
that.
even know.
Let's do
Yeah.
that. Let's do your just name some people you like. Reporters, authors, analysts that you like to listen to, or whose work you respect.
Damn. Recently, man, I've been listening to a lot of Ryan Christian for the COVID stuff. He hasn't done a lot of written stuff recently. Um, but I mean, he has amazing work diving deep into the scientific literature. Journalists, so not commentators, in which case I would include Glory, who's in the chat right now. Great commentator from Slow News Day. Um, but journalists, Corey Morningstar has really long, very well researched stuff. Highly recommend her work, diving deep into exposing these nonprofits, the fourth industrial revolution, and the Great Reset. Also does stuff on COVID. Oh shit, Lex Wexner, man, gotta give you a shout out.
Yeah, so you guys, we have Les Wexner in the chat here. He says, "quote Give me a shout out, Franco." So that's where that came from. Probably not the real Les Wexner.
Nah, he's not. But if it is, man, fuck you, Lex Wexner.
Yeah, right.
Whitney Webb also dives deep into these corrupt people, corrupt institutions. Derek Bros, man, he has a great documentary series, and he also does great written work. Also, I learned a lot from him on 5G. He's looked into the Franklins also. Um, I had this individual on my show, and I'm blanking on her name, which I feel horrible about. But she's also looked into the Franklins, and some of these weird cults that would bring children in, but she's in consortium news. You might know her name. Uh, Maybe someone in the chat can help me out with that.
Okay,
Um,
okay. Yeah, no,
Recently,
that's a
I've been
good.
learning a lot also from African foreign policy from Tim Coles. There's probably other great journalists out there that dive deep into African geopolitics, which isn't looked into enough.
No,
Uh,
definitely not. That's definitely my weakest point, probably, is
yeah,
Africa. Yeah.
Robert Inlakesh, who looks at Syria and the Middle East foreign policy, Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett, who are looking a lot into Syrian foreign policy and Yemen. Liz Voss, Elizabeth Voss, goodness gracious, man, of
Okay,
the
so that's who it
Finders
is.
cult. Yeah,
Okay. Yep, Finders Cult. Yep. Thank you, Glory Jones, for that. Liz Voss. We'll have to check her out.
yeah. There's plenty more journalists out there who just aren't coming. I
No,
feel
no
bad
worries.
when people, yeah,
Yeah, no, everyone has that problem, off the dome, just listing them off. But as long as people list a few, just so people have some more resources to check out, I think that's great. Um, but I wanted to ask you, have you done any traveling in the past? Or actually, before we get to that, I had an addendum to that question. Uh, as far as racism goes, did you experience that growing up?
I
And what are your
experienced the snooty kind of racism because I live in this weird part of this county that's north of DC in Maryland, where there's apartments and poor people that live near where I live, a lot of Hispanic people, a lot of black people. But then when you go up the street, uh, there's more white people with really rich houses, many of which work in DC, and we all fall in the same consortium. So we go to the same elementary, middle, and especially high school, because we do have some of the best public schools in the country in this county. Um, so a lot of these rich white kids, and there was more like I guess I could tell the difference between, oh, you're just being funny racism, because back then in the early 2000s, right, Dave Chappelle and all that stuff, and we remember early 2000s comedy and mid 2000s comedy. uh we would say racist jokes like towards each other, um and but when it's like the snooty kind where they would like exclude you from things, or the coaches wouldn't play you, and then you see who's on the field and it's only white people. uh, I've experienced that kind of racism.
Wow, wow. See, I wasn't sure if that happened to me because but there was one team I was on where I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was because I was an outsider in that I didn't go to the school or if there was some racial component to it because my coach was a police officer at the time. So, wow, that's amazing you experienced that, Franco. The reason I ask is because the way that argument and that topic has gotten flipped around, it's almost like the media and the deep state got ahead of the whole tolerance thing, flipped it to make it like anti-white racism, right? So where in reality the system at large is still implicitly racist against, let me know what you think about this, against browns and blacks. You have the media who is more so racist overtly on the surface against whites, right? So like almost they got ahead of it because they want that divide and conquer race war tactic. Let me know what you think about that because it's something that I've noticed just talking to people from different demographics, whether it's attractive older white ladies or anyone, we don't all have the same experience. So trying to get them to understand that, yes, the media is, there's an anti-white, uh, taint to the media. That doesn't mean that racism is, and people blow it out of proportion all the time now. That doesn't mean that racism is gone, right? It's still present, at least in certain areas, right? What
Yeah,
do you think?
yeah, racism is still present. um I honestly prefer the freaking, well, it's unpleasant either way when people are in your face like saying racial slurs to me, and I have experienced that. At least they're doing that to my face, as opposed to the more annoying, snooty kind of racism that I experience with a lot of these rich white people that live around here. Um, like in restaurants, for example, like it's very clearly like you're treating me a certain way because of how I look, and you're trying to act like you're not racist,
How would they
or
treat you
you're excluding me. Um, like
in the restaurants?
recently, this lady started yelling at me and my family for not being masked up and being too close to her table. But then she doesn't say anything to the other tables that were near her, equidistant, and they were all white. And
Sure.
then she gets up and hugs her white friend up close. And I'm like, okay, so you're telling us we're not taking this situation seriously, but you're running up and hugging your white friend, like up close.
Yeah.
And then she called us stupid. She was like, "Man, this country's filled with so many stupid people not taking this seriously." And then my aunt was just like, "Yeah, I agree. I agree. A lot of stupid people in this country." But that's something that's just an example that happened recently. I'd have to take time to remember more
Sure.
of
I'm
other
just curious.
examples.
Yeah, you don't have to relay them all. I was just curious because it's different depending on where you are in the country. The United States, I think, is still quite insular. Most Americans don't travel, and because of that, you have a regional insularity whereby people really only know the people they grew up around. And especially with, I think, our generation, it was really a transition period where it became uncool to be a racist, and then that, of course, as I mentioned, was taken advantage of. But at the same time, it's like, where do these kids learn it? They got to learn it from somewhere. It's not like kids are born racist, right? So I think that's a point that I always try to make with people is, um, and the thing too is like even like the joking stuff. It's if it's like consistent and it's it affects you. It still I think it still affects me to this day.
Yeah,
Um, and certain people, it's really tough. Even like people I'm related to who are white, I think some of them still have a hard time understanding it. It's unfortunate. But I wanted to ask, do you have any experience traveling, and if so, what does that consist of? Because I love to travel.
yeah, yeah. And I was gonna say, yeah, sometimes like the joking stuff, like when we were kids and all that, sometimes it would get blown out of proportion,
For
and some
sure.
people just didn't know when to stop. Um, Traveling, that's something that I wish I could do more. When I've traveled a lot to Peru, because of family, but the last time I went there was in 2015, the New Year's from 2014 to 2015. Um, to other states, I went to New York to cover a the March for Medicare for All rally. Now, my views on that have evolved, but nonetheless, I wanted to show solidarity with people there, um, because, of course, they are upset with the medical system. But as long as legislation is introduced that is written by the lobbyists, it's going to be a Trojan horse. There's going to be stuff in that bill, in that legislation, that's going to um, include things that will increase surveillance on the people or increase the money in the pockets of the people invested in these hospitals, insurance companies, etc. Um, so I would love to travel to more states outside of DC, Maryland to cover more protests, or I guess like stories, anything. I would love to travel more. I would love to do what the Convo Couch is doing, the fam over in Nicaragua. I would love to get to know what the communities are like in Nicaragua, um, what the communities are like outside of the Americas. I've never gone overseas to Europe or Africa or Asia. I would love to go there. Primarily Asia and Africa. Um, I would love to go there and cover stories. Um, Hopefully, as time goes on and I'm able to pick up more recognition, etc., I'll have enough money to be able to travel to those places.
Excellent. And what about books, documentaries, or films that you find to be influential? Could be fiction or nonfiction. Anything that comes to mind, authors, directors, or just titles of books and films that you like.
I like to read books on spirituality and self-help. I think that is what has helped me also find my life purpose, and help me with how to approach my life purpose. Um, it's helped me with dealing with people also, not letting that get to me too much. Because when you're in this field, you are going to deal with all kinds of people. There's going to be some people that are going to be toxic. Um, so reading books on spirituality or psychology, or if you consider yourself atheist and you can read books on philosophy, that stuff will help grow your mind. It will help you see the world more objectively. So I like reading books on that. I like reading books on that cover history and recent history. I want to read more books on that, seeing where all this stuff connects also. And sometimes these spiritual books connect with the stuff that I read in the political and historical books. Um, so I like integrating these things. Um, Documentaries, I like watching documentaries that expose these institutions that are oppressing us. Um, Although sometimes these directors or executive producers, like for example, what's that one guy's name?
Michael
My,
Moore.
Michael Moore, yeah. He has some good documentaries, but I don't agree with all his takes, all his political takes. Um, Jason Bermas has great documentaries. Uh, what else? Derek Brose's documentary is also really great at exposing this stuff. Like I can share that to my family and friends, and then their minds are blown when they watch it. Uh, so those are stuff I like. And then for escapism, I like watching anime. I like watching comic book movies. Yes, I know the corruption in Hollywood. I know the military and intelligence have their hands on things, but we gotta have some stuff to get our minds off of all the horrible stuff that's in this world, right?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I like. I'm not a huge superhero movie guy, but I like The Watchmen. I
Yeah,
don't know if you've seen
I've
Watchmen.
seen Watchmen. Yeah,
Oh, that's great.
a lot
It's
of people
great.
don't like it, and
Oh, it's
then
so
but
good.
it's
It's too
like
dark for most people, I think.
yeah, it takes things page for page from the comics. Uh, I thought it was great. The director's cut is even better.
Oh man, it's really long. I watched the first time I watched it. I wasn't the director's cut because it was in the movies. Story time here a second. I actually, with my best friend in middle school, we would sneak into movies. We'd just walk in without paying, and that's how we got to see Watchmen because I think it's rated R. And the extended version, yeah, I rewatched it, the director's cut in college. So it was what, almost a decade later. I think it came out in 2009, and I was just blown away. I was like, wow, this is amazing movie. I totally forgot about it. Yeah, Watchmen's a
Doctor
great one.
Manhattan. Rorschach was my favorite character in that movie.
He
I
was
gotta
probably
rewatch that.
my favorite too. I think was probably Rorschach. I have to say I liked let's not do spoilers, but I liked I I liked Ozymandias too. I admired him a little bit. Maybe I hate to admit that, but it's a great movie.
I
And
like how he's was like the best martial artist out of all of them, and like was well that is spoilers, but
he's great. Yeah, he's a great
yeah,
fighter.
he's a good fighter. Yeah.
Yeah, but they all had their own style. Rorschach was a lot of less stealth and sneaky, and he still could fight. And then the comedian was like more so brute, brawling and such. But yeah, I might rewatch that soon. What tips do you have for people who want to do what you're doing? However you would describe that.
If you want to be a political commentator or a journalist, make sure you don't fall into tribalism. Stay grounded. Talk to your audience. They can give you plenty of information. They can be very supportive. Shout out to everyone who's in the chat right now who's supporting us. Awesome people. I know a lot of them. Propaganda, ICU, Glory Jones, Atris. The collaborations are awesome. Don't be so shy. Reach out to people, and you can get invested into the conversations that you have with these people. Initially, yeah, you're gonna be nervous and all that, but it'll go away. Um, if you want to read stuff on spirituality or philosophy to help you see things more objectively, help you realize how little you know, and how little make you realize how little everybody else knows, and how pretty much everything you were told from birth, most of it was just a story that was told to you, and you don't know how true it is. And now that you're more aware, you're going to do the investigation and inform yourself more about what's going on. Just have fun with it. Try to be more of a journalist than like someone who's too invested into, I guess, the surface level of the politics, or getting too caught up in covering the drama and everything. Like, there is a place for that, and if you want to cover it, it's fine if you do it. But remember that at the end of the day, what is most important is covering the stories that aren't being talked enough about in the mainstream, helping to inform as many people as you can. So those are just some things that I would let people know.
And where can people find you, Franco? Where can they find your work? How can they support you?
You can find me on Frank Analysis on YouTube, on Rockfin, on Odyssey. I'm looking to get into more platforms. You can find me at B43Franco on Twitter. That's the only social media platform where I am at as Frank Analysis. Oh, Glory just reminded me. In terms of if you want to be a political commentator or journalist or whatever, don't be afraid to get on the ground and talk to real people. Stay grounded. That's something that I love doing. Um, but yeah, man, thank you very much for having me on the show. I had a blast.
Of course, Franco. Of course. Let's do it again sometime. And likewise,
For
if
sure.
you ever want me on again to talk about anything, just let me know. And if people want to access this video version, rockfin.com, ROKFIN.com/AddyAds, ADDYADDS, where Franco is also on Rockfin. And the links he mentioned are all in the show notes / description. We're also on the normal big tech websites, which I don't need to list, and then my PeerTube at vid.addyads.us as well. And audio version anywhere podcasts can be found, Spreaker, iTunes, etc. So please support Franco and myself. We're independent media. I think we're doing really necessary work, and we also get paid a fraction of what the mainstreamers get paid. And I think nonetheless are held actually to a higher standard, counterintuitively. So thanks again, Franco, and thanks to the audience for tuning in as well. Stay frosty, folks, and we will see everybody next time.